We've already learnt about some of the main organelles that you can find in cells, and now we're going to look at some of the more specialized and less common ones. But these are still just as important because they all have a particular role to play in the cell. So the example cell we're looking at here, because there's no cell wall, we know this is an animal cell. So the first part we'll look at in more detail is the nucleus, which is the purple section here on this diagram. And the nucleus is divided into some smaller little structures. The first one, which is the dark spot you can see in every nucleus, which is called the nucleolus. And the nucleolus is responsible for making ribosomes, which are the small organelles that make protein. So ribosomes are made here, and then they move out of the nucleus and into the cytoplasm where they start to do their job. And there are tiny pores or holes in the nucleus where chemicals and molecules can move out, and they're called nucleopores. And that's how ribosomes and other molecules move in and out of the nucleus, because the nucleus needs to really carefully control which chemicals can come in and out so they don't damage the DNA. So it controls molecules moving in and out of the nucleus. And the membrane around the outside of the nucleus, we just call that the nuclear membrane. And like every membrane in a cell, it keeps molecules inside it so that they don't escape. And for the nucleus, it's responsible for keeping the DNA all in one place. And the DNA we call chromatin. Because it's the DNA molecule all mixed together with some other molecules too, to make it easier for the cell to use. Next, we've got a region which really runs throughout all the cell, and you can see these long fibers down along the side here. This is called the cytoskeleton. And think of it just like the skeleton of an animal. It's made of really tough molecules and strong ones that help the cell to keep its shape. And it provides almost like a train track for organelles to move along, particularly for organelles like vesicles that need to move from one place to another. So it helps organelles to move. Next, we've got some organelles that you can find on the outside of some cells, and these are mainly to help the cell move. The first one is called a flagellum, which is a long, almost like a snake's tail, that moves back and forth and helps the cell move. Or sometimes other cells will have cilia, which are a lot smaller, almost like fingers coming out of the cell. And they all move together like the Mexican wave going through the stadium, and they can also help the cell move throughout its habitat. The next two organelles are part of a really complicated membrane system that you can find in cells, and it's this dark blue area in the middle and the blue on the side. So these two organelles together are called the endoplasmic reticulum. And it's a complicated maze of of cell membranes that have lots of surface area and they have a space inside them, like lots of pancakes stacked on top of each other. And there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. There's the smooth, ER for short, and that's the smooth surface one on the side here. That is where the cell makes all its fats and oils. Fats and oils synthesis. Because all cells need fats and oils to survive and to build their other organelles. The next endoplasmic reticulum is the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And surprisingly, it's the one with the rough surface with little dots along it. So it's always easy to tell the difference between the smooth and the rough. The rough endoplasmic reticulum, all the little dots that you can see are actually ribosomes that make proteins. So those ribosomes, it contains ribosomes, and these ribosomes are making proteins that the cell is going to export outside of the cell. So it synthesizes or makes proteins to be exported. And cells that are glands have lots and lots of rough endoplasmic reticulum. For example, a saliva gland. It's going to be making lots of protein that it needs to put into our saliva. So saliva cells will have lots of rough endoplasmic reticulum. It's the same for our hormone producing cells, like in the liver or our gallbladder as well. These will all have a lot of ribosomes on their rough endoplasmic reticulum. Next, we have another organelle made of membranes, and this one is closely related to the endoplasmic reticulum. It's called the Golgi Apparatus. And the Golgi apparatus, it receives all of the proteins from the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and it packages them up and labels them where they need to be delivered. So think of it like almost the post office. It receives the proteins to be exported, and then it labels them and sends them where they need to go. And lastly, in animal cells in particular, we can see these small vesicles here. And animal cells have another type of vesicle, which is called a lysosome. And lysosomes, they're like the rubbish bin of the cell. They collect any wastes and they break them all down so they can be reused. They collect waste molecules and then they break them down so they can be reused. So we've now learnt over 15 different organelles that you can find in cells, and we're starting to build a picture of how complicated cells actually are. And it's pretty amazing to think that all this machinery that allows cells to work has evolved over millions of years on Earth.